What's up guys, welcome back to Fancy Goldfish Fanatics. Today we are going to be speaking all about goldfish tail types, so make sure you stay tuned to find out more. Hey Fanatics family, welcome back. As always, check out those links in the description. Make sure to check out Jimmy Goldfish USA if you're from the USA and Star Fisheries if you're from the UK. Both companies can ship nationwide and they can cover all of your goldfish needs. Today we are going to be covering lots of different goldfish tail types. Now it is a big topic and one that I haven't seen too much information on, so I thought it would be suitable to talk about that today. As you will also notice, I have a brand new sofa finally. I've been trying to get a new sofa for ages, so we've got a much better positioning for the videos and a much comfier, nicer sofa for me to talk to you guys on. So today let's get straight into the video. The first fish we're going to be talking about is the Aranda, and then we'll move on to the Rancho and a few more after that. The Aranda and the Rancho are probably the main tail type focused goldfish that we look for. So I'll start off with the Aranda and we can go from there. So the first Aranda that I'm just going to put up on the screen now for you is your generic standard body shape, standard tail Aranda. They have quite a fanned open tail at the rear, quite long and flowy but not too long, if that makes sense, not like a fan tail for example. But they have generally a nice splayed open tail with quite a bit of length to it. Now we will move on to the slightly more modified new style Aranda. The bodies are far deeper, far bigger wens, and as you will see on this picture right here, they have a much smaller tail, and sometimes they call this mini tail or short tail, which is more of the new fad, the new trend, the way the goldfish hobby is going, and for those sort of top end keepers, that is exactly what they look for. They look for that body shape and that small tail. You can really see the mini tail is far less exaggerated than that fan tail, longer tail style in the previous picture. So next up we are going from the mini tail extreme all the way to the large tail extreme, and this is an Orchid Tail Aranda. Now the tail, you will notice, is huge. It is so much bigger than that mini tail and also that standard generic tail that we saw in the first picture. The Orchid Tail is mainly got two big bulbs on the top and the bottom of the fin. It is quite elongated rather than lengthy, if that makes sense. So the tail is more elongated in the upward direction rather than out the back of the fish. Now this gives the fish a huge caudal fin to move through the water, so beware if you are trying to catch these fish out of your aquarium or buying Orchid Tail Aranda. They definitely will give you a bit of a splash and a bit of a tidal wave. They have a really nice condensed tail. There is not any sort of filaments coming out of the fins like you would see on the Geophagus with those filaments coming out, and maybe on a fan tail which might be a little bit more jagged. They have a nice rounded top and also rounded bottom to the tail, which also brings me on to the next type of Aranda, as you can see here, which is actually a rose tail Aranda. Now the Orchid Tail and the rose tail are very, very similar in looks. However, generally you'll find the rose tail is much shorter, much more smaller, less elongated than you would have seen on the Orchid Tail. The tail is much more condensed, and you'll notice that the top and the bottom don't quite pull out quite as much as the Orchid Tail. The rose tail is supposed to emulate the rose petal, and that has that quite curved edge to it. So you'll notice that the tail on the rose tail is slightly more exaggerated than the Orchid Tail. Both the Orchid Tail and the rose tail are very desired, and they both have their positives and negatives in the eye of the keeper, but both are absolutely stunning examples and very different from that first picture that we saw, as you can see here, the original Aranda tail type. So now we've looked at the new era, the new style of tail types. Next up we can see the fan tail Aranda. As you will be able to see in this picture, the tail is far more elongated, it is far more forked and definitely more pronounced than the long flowy general fins of the Orchid Tail or the Rose Tail. You'll notice that the fins are far more natural. They are far more suited to a natural swimming style that you would find in a fantail and a common goldfish, and they're far more related to those common counterparts, and generally they are quite a little bit more stronger than you would find in these more modified mini tail, rose tail, orchid tail fish, and they have quite good genetics generally. These are, as I mentioned, quite close to their wild counterparts, and this long forked fin gives them much better swimming ability, much better balance as well, but generally it is not desired as much from the high-end hobbyists, high-end keepers that aim to specifically go for those new style of fish. So similar to the Aranda, the Ranchos also have a few different tail types. As you'll notice here on this picture of this white Rancho, the tail is very closely similar to the fantail. I know it is a lot shorter, and that is because the Rancho is far more heavily genetically changed from the Aranda, but it has quite a fork to the tail, nice splayed open tail for swimming, and it has quite an elongated tail compared to its new counterpart, the mini tail Rancho, as you'll see here. The mini tail Rancho generally doesn't have that fork to the tail. It has those rounded edges that we saw on the rose tail Aranda. They have quite small tails. They're really trying to get those tails as small as possible. Sorry, the stingray's making a little bit of noise in the background. The breeders are really focusing on this tail. After the body shape, they are really trying to focus on getting this tail as small as possible. Unfortunately, this really doesn't help with the fish's swimming abilities. Its balance and its buoyancy problems can also be contributed to the weak, small tail, as the fish can't power through the water, especially with those large bodies. But the general fad, the general trends are following this small mini tail style Rancho and also the Aranda as well. And they seem to think it looks quite cute as well. And I have to say, I do really like the mini tail Rancho. Although I wouldn't keep them anymore. I did have some last year before I had a massive fish kill. But I would generally go for the slightly elongated, larger tails if you want a fish that's got a bit more vigor, a bit more strength. But the mini tails do look very cute on the fish, and you have to say they do look really nice. So now we have covered the general tail types of the Aranda and Rancho. I thought it'd be nice to look at a few different types of other goldfish that are in the goldfish world. Personally, fish that aren't kept as much as the Aranda and the Rancho, but nonetheless really beautiful fish overall. A really similar counterpart to the common goldfish is the Joaquin, however you want to pronounce it. This fish has a really small, short tail. Although the body is elongated similar to the common goldfish, the tail has been selectively bred to become shorter. It is a very fork shape. Generally, we'll find in the Rancho and the Aranda that the tail is generally around a 90-degree angle from the fish's body, but on a Joaquin and also on a top view Rancho, you'll notice that tail starts to flatten out a lot more and is more of a 45-degree angle away from the body. Although this gives the fish much better swimming capabilities and is much closer to the wild counterpart of the common goldfish with that straight tail, the Joaquin has the slightly shorter tail, which does hinder its swimming a little bit. Although it does have a much more powerful body, as it is long and slender rather than short, round and compact. The tail type has been genetically bred to have been shortened, so it is nice to look at from the top view, especially as these fish are generally for the most part kept in ponds, and that splayed open tail similar to the top view Rancho does look really attractive and really stunning in a top view pond scenario. So next up we have got this Calico Ryukin that you can see here. Similar to the Rancho and the Aranda, breeders are trying to emulate that mini tail style. Although this fish has sort of a medium tail style, it is not a Broadtail Ryukin, which has a really wide stance tail, really long flowy fins and a really long tail in comparison to the body. You can see here on this picture that this medium tail is that fine balance between a mini tail Ryukin, similar to the ones I've got in that tank. I would say the ones I've got in that tank are very similar to this, although they do have that little bit more of a fork on the tail, so they are slightly closer to the common goldfish. But on this picture you can see here, it is more of that rose tail with those curved rounded edges, similar to the rose tail Aranda that we saw, but it is not as extreme as a mini tail, small tail Rancho, which will definitely lead to more swimming problems. Although the Ryukin are far stronger, and I've found personally myself that they're far more sturdier than a short-tailed Rancho or a small Rancho, I think it's quite nice to have this common ground between the mini tail and the large fantail. And now I believe this tail looks quite nice, and this is quite an attractive Calico Ryukin, and as I said, very similar to the ones I've got in my tank. So last but not least, we have this beautiful Broadtail Moor, and this is a fish I really don't see being kept very often, and they are absolutely stunning. They are both beautiful in the side view aquarium, and they're also absolutely stunning in a top-down looking pond. They have lovely, flowy, long fins. They're really graceful and absolutely great to look at. Similar to a butterfly koi in the koi industry, the Broadtail Moor has a really large, wide-gaped tail. It has long, flowy fins, and they just look absolutely beautiful, especially in this kind of chocolatey dark brown, black colour. They really have some beauty about them. And as I said, I don't see too many people keeping them. I do see quite a lot of black moors that are very similar to this, but with more of a shorter, stubbier, pointed tail. But the Broadtail Moor is an absolutely stunning fish, and this tail type commonly resides also into the Broadtail Ryukin, and they're very similar styles in tails basically. So I haven't put the Broadtail Ryukin on the screen, but you can sort of catch my drift and see. We'll try to see what it would look like on a Ryukin with that large wide gape, long flowy tail. So that is it for this video. I really hope I have informed you guys a bit more about goldfish tail types. Maybe some of you watching haven't even thought about tail types and the different types of tails you can get on the exact same variety. Like we have with the Aranda, we've got the classic tail, we've got the fan tail, the rose tail, the orchid tail, the mini tail, and I believe there's a few more other tail types that I haven't spoken about in this video. But maybe when you're searching for your next fancy goldfish, you might consider the tail type and how it actually affects the fish in a positive or negative way. So if you've got any questions about tail types, or you've got any questions in general, link them down below and I'll try my best to answer them. If you've got any video suggestions or video ideas or topics that you would like me to cover on the channel, also feel free to drop those down below and I will get that on the channel. If you want to have your tank featured on the channel, send me an email down below. The email is in the description, fancygoldfishfanatics@gmail.com, and we can get yours set up on the channel. So as always, thank you all for watching. Remember to keep those water changes up, and happy fish keeping.